we were reduced to tears of anger and despair and rage in December and January as the bombs fell on the people of Gaza. Many of us, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, took to the street. I know in this city, in the city that I live in London. And we took to the street, and it was important to demonstrate, because anybody who ever raises with you, what's the point of demonstrating? At least over this question, speak to people, and we will be speaking to people, we hope, directly in Gaza, and they will tell you that they saw the pictures. You may not have seen them on CNN, but they saw the pictures on Al Jazeera and Press TV and Al Hilal and all the other networks. They saw people in the United States of America demonstrating, and not just demonstrating, but in polls showing that a majority of people were against the Israeli bombardment of the defence of civilians of Gaza. It enabled them to survive those 22 dark days. But we demonstrated, and of course, we all felt that demonstrating wasn't enough. And it was on a wintry day in London that I was marching with George on a demonstration of 100,000 people, again past the Israeli embassy, and despite us marching past it, it was still there, completely intact, defying us. And George decided that we should do something more, and he came up with the idea that we should take a convoy of material aid from Britain to Gaza. And that was on January the 10th. On February the 14th, we headed off, and we anticipated, when we came up with the idea, that we'd have half a dozen vehicles or so, a few brave souls who might make the journey. We left Britain with over 100 vehicles, 255 people, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of aid, and 23 days later, 5,500 miles later, we were able to cross from Egypt into Gaza, and the whole of Gaza came out. The people of the United States are really not that different from the people of Britain, perhaps divided by a common language, but not that different from the people in Britain. So George came and did meetings in the US, and it was clear that there was the basis of support for such a venture from the US. And I have to say that the last 6 weeks have been absolutely extraordinary. People from all walks of life, across all the demographics and communities across this country, the cities from San Diego through to New York, from New Jersey, the state of New Jersey down to California, to Texas, to Minnesota, where George was fortunate enough to speak on the very day that the senator, as was Norm Coleman, who tried to talk to him in the Senate, was finally declared to be the loser of that particular contest. He was fortunate enough to speak on that day. At every single place, people have come out across the board in support of this cause. And there has been fear, but I think that fear is lifting. The fear of the last 8 years is lifting, and people are beginning to feel more confident about what can be done. And that's expressing itself, I think, in a change in US public opinion over this issue, not as far as we would like, not as fast as we would like, but in the direction that we would like. And therefore, we can have a major impact in accelerating and pushing further public opinion. And if you can help shift public opinion, ultimately public policy follows. How that follows is quite a complicated process, but without changing public opinion, you don't change the public policies. And certainly this has been part of changing public opinion. Fundraisers, donations, people of considerable means, not outlandish means, but considerable means, giving tens of thousands of dollars, all the way through to people organising bake sales or other forms of fundraising. People, I know now, getting together the final few dollars to pay for this mission. The Widow's Mite, perhaps this is the right place to mention the powers of the Widow's Mite. People collecting from all walks of life to make this thing happen. And so I'm very pleased to tell you that beginning tomorrow, people are going out on different flights, but we will leave the United States of America with the single biggest delegation and convoy of aid to Palestine that's ever left these shores. Already the first member of our delegation is in Egypt, is in Cairo. He travelled earlier. He couldn't travel today, he couldn't travel tomorrow. His name is Rabbi Weiss. He's been joined by 2 other rabbis, Rabbis Feldman and Rosenberg, from the Torah Carter. demonstrating that this question of Palestine is not a question of religion, it's a question of justice, it's a question of human rights, it's a question of politics, it's about the political exclusion of one people by European colonial powers backing another people. And that's why we have support from Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, Black Americans, Americans across the board for this particular project. And not just this project, but we hope for the wider Palestine solidarity movement, which certainly in my country for too long was left in a ghetto, and it's time for us to break out of those ghettos over this question and indeed over many other questions. I'm also very, very pleased, honoured to have with us on the delegation Councilman Barron, who, if you don't know, you really should know, that during those 22 days was the only New York politician to stand up, speak out in support of the people of Gaza, to hold a press conference, when George and I met him, George said, well, you know, I hope you get re-elected because you're up for election. And I tell you in all honesty, Councilman Barron said, this isn't about getting re-elected, this is about what's right and what's wrong. And those are the kind of politicians we need in this country and we could do with in many other countries.